Welcome to our class on the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach, the 7 universal Noachite commandments for all of mankind. We're going to begin a new topic, a new series today, and the topic is the Goy, the Nachri, the Ger Toishav, with regards to Shabbos, to the Holy Sabbath. First of all, let me make sort of a disclaimer. And we are not going to be giving a clear, concise, halachic, legal, Jewish law, legal ruling. We will first try to go through some of the sources, not all, and we're going to try, with the help of Hashem, to do it in an orderly fashion, starting from the Chumash, the Bible itself. We're going to see what the verse states, and then we're going to take it from there. Just by way of a very brief introduction, a reminder, and that is, although in general there are only 2 types of people, Yisrael, commonly known today in English as Jews, or a member of the Jewish faith, and the definition of that is someone who was born to a Jewish mother or was nisgayer kahalacha, converted to Judaism according to the letter of the law, according to the way that it has been given down from God to Moses 3,500 years ago, and as it is recorded and the final ruling in the Shulchan Aruch and the Jewish Code of Law. So if a person goes through the proper process of converting according to Jewish law, then that person is also 100% Jewish. That's one type of a person, known as the Jew, or biblically the Israelite. And then there's the rest of the world, every other human being who's not Jewish. And as we've discussed many times during these classes, there are different terms used, and a lot of it is unfortunately been very blurred, and that is due to the censorship that the various different censorship, whether it was the church or whoever, over the years, they've tampered with the text of the Talmud and the text of the Rambam, Maimonides, and of most all other printed Jewish literature, Talmudic literature, and to the extent that it's very difficult to know what the real word should be. And many times when it says akum, which is an acronym for one who worships the stars and the constellations, or an idolater, in many instances it should really say something to the effect of goy or nachri, and sometimes it makes a big difference, so it's important to know. And sometimes we're able to go and find early manuscripts which shed light and have make a very big difference, a practical difference. At any rate, within the non-Jewish world, within the human race other than the Jews, every human being is required to keep the 7 Noachite commandments, preferably with the understanding and the acceptance and the belief that they are God-given through Moshe Rabbeinu, through Moses, our teacher, at Sinai. In the times of the temple, when we had in the earlier times of the first temple, I should say, when the Yovel, when the Jubilee year, the 50th year, was in effect, and all of the Jewish people lived in the land of Israel, so there's a concept of accepting, for the Jewish people to accept, a Ger Toishav, a resident, alien, ger, a ger toishav. The Rambam says in a number of places that when we don't have the yovel, we cannot accept the ger toishav. A ger toishav is an individual who formally accepts upon himself to keep the 7 commandments, and therefore he has rights that a regular non-Jew, a stam goy, a plain non-Jew, doesn't have. And the Jewish community in the land of Israel is obligated to sustain him, to support him, to help him. That's one type of person. Then you have someone who is different, but in certain ways similar, and that would be the Eved Kena'ani, the non-Jewish slave belonging to a Jew, which again, that we don't have now as well. There's no such thing as an Eved in that sense anymore as well. However, the Eved Kena'ani actually goes through a form of conversion, and he is therefore not a regular non-Jew, although he's not Jewish, but he's owned by a Jew, he's the property of a Jew, and he is obligated to keep much more than the 7. He is obligated to keep all of the commandments that a regular Jewish woman is obligated to keep. A Jewish woman is exempt from a whole bunch of commandments, which we're not going to get into now why, but leave that, be that as it may. The non-Jewish slave, the Eved Kenani, has to keep all the mitzvahs, all the commandments that the Jewish woman has to keep. So, the question becomes with regards to Shabbos. One other quick point I want to mention before we go into the class. There's certain things that the non-Jew, the Ben Noyach, is required and obligated. And those are the 7, as we said. Can't stress that enough. To keep the 7 mitzvahs in their entirety with all their details. Then there is more, perhaps much more, that if he wants, he may observe as well. But so long as he does not accept upon himself all 613 of the commandments of the Jewish people, he cannot be a ger, he cannot convert and become a Jew. Then, though, however, as long as he's not a ger tzedek, as long as he's not a convert to Judaism, he is not permitted to do certain things. They're not optional. They're off limits for him. And I'll just name one. He's not permitted to keep Shabbos. As a matter of fact, it says, this is the Rambam, Maimonides rules, that a non-Jew, a goy, a nochri, a regular ben noyach, who keeps Shabbos, that is a capital offense for him. That doesn't mean that the Jewish court, or for that matter, the B'nai Noyach court, that's one of the 7 mitzvahs, that they should establish a court system. That doesn't mean that he would actually be put to death, because a number of times when it says chayav misa, that he's obligated to be put to death, it just means that that is the severity of the crime that he has committed, but he isn't actually put to death as he would be for one of the 7. So it doesn't mean that anybody would really put him to death. The court may not do that, but it is a severe crime that the quote-unquote penalty would be death. So a non-Jew can't keep Shabbos. All right. And now, let us begin. And you do need to be very patient, because this is going to be quite lengthy throughout all the various classes as we break it up. And we're going to try to go through it detail by detail, piece by piece. And again, we're not giving any ruling, so please do not come to any practical conclusions yet. Let's wait until we wrap it up and we conclude the entire series. So we're going to start from the beginning. And the beginning is the good book, known as the Torah, the Chumash, Chamisha Chumshei Torah. When God revealed himself at Sinai, and he said, Daseras Hadibrois, which is commonly translated in English as the 10 Commandments. That's not an accurate translation, but let's leave it. The 10 Commandments. They are found in Parshas Yisro, in the book of Shmos, the book of Exodus, chapter 20. And then, 40 years later, in the book of Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, where he's repeating and highlighting the first 4 books and all the various commandments, he then repeats these Aseres HaDibros, the 10 commandments, in Parshas Va'eschanon. That would be in Deuteronomy chapter 5. So, let us read the verse, one of the verses, speaking about Shabbos and who needs to keep the Sabbath. So the verse says as follows. Remember the day of Shabbos to keep it holy, to sanctify it. 6 yomim ta'avoid, 6 days you shall labor or work. Ve'asisa kol malachtecha, and you will do all of your labor. Ve'yoyim hashvi'i, and the 7th day, Shabbos l'Hashem Elokecha, is a day of Sabbath, a day of rest for God, your God. Lo yisase chol melacha, you shall not do any melacha, any labor. Ata, you, uvincha, and your son, uvitecha, and your daughter, avdecha, your slave, va'amoscha, and your maidservant, uvehemtecha, and your beast, your animal. And here's the key word, the crucial word for our discussion. V'gercha, and your ger, asher b'sha'arecha, which is in your gate, in your city. So we have over here a category of who has to keep Shabbos. It doesn't just say, as it does by most other commandments, speaking to the Jewish people, so all of you, of course. No, it says you, and your son, and your daughter, and the last one in this list is gercha, your ger. Likewise, in Va'eschanon, where it is repeated, so we find very similar language. And if you follow carefully, you'll see small nuances of a difference, but that's not what our class is about, but I will go through it now. Let's just read it and translate. Shomor es yom HaShabbos lekadshoi. Guard, or keep, the day of Shabbos to make it holy, to sanctify it. Kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha, as God your God has commanded you. Sheishes yomim ta'avoid, 6 days you shall work. Ve'asisa kol malachtecha, and you will do all of your labor. V'yem hashvi'i Shabbos l'Hashem Elokecha, and the 7th day is Shabbos, Sabbath, the day of rest, for God your God. Loi sase chol melacha, you are not to do any melacha, labor. Ata, you. Uvincha, and your son. Uvitecha, and your daughter. Ve'avdecha, and your slave. Va'amosecha, and your maidservant. Ve'shorcha, and your ox. V'chamorcha, and your donkey. V'chol behemtecha, and all of your beasts or animals. V'gercha, and your ger, asher b'she'arecha, which is in your gate. Your gates. Leman, in order, yanuach, that shall rest, avdecha, your slave, v'amoscha, and your maidservant, ka moicha, like you, just as you are resting. That's the Chumash. So we have the word V'gercha, and your ger. Perhaps that means the convert has to keep Shabbos. Or perhaps that means the ger Toshav. Let's leave that for now. Put that on hold and remember that the verses, both in Yisroi as well as in Va'eschanon, say in the list, the last one in the list is V'gercha. Now, we're going to go to the Rambam, Maimonides, in the Laws of Shabbos, chapter 20. Halacha, law or paragraph 14. Says the Rambam, Perek Chaf, Hilchot Shabbos, Halacha Yudalid. Kishem she'adam mitzuve al shvisas behemtoi b'Shabbos. Just as a person, meaning a Jew, is commanded to see to it that his animal rests on Shabbos, kach hu mitzuve al shvisas avdoi va'amosoi. So too, he is commanded to see to it that his slave and maidservant also, likewise, rest on Shabbos. Ve'af alpi, and even though, shehein b'nei das, they're people with intelligence and freedom of choice. They're independent individuals. Uladas atzman oisin, and whatever they do, they're doing it on their own. So if they were to do forbidden labor on Shabbos, they're people. They're not property in the sense of being a machine or being programmed or an animal where you can control. These are people, the Eved and the Amma. Yet, nonetheless, mitzvah aleinu, it is a commandment upon us, the Jewish people, the owner of the slave, l'shamran, to guard them, uleman'an, and to withhold them me'asiyas melacha b'Shabbos, from doing melacha on Shabbos. And from now on, let's try to use the word melacha without translating or explaining it. Melacha basically is forbidden labor on the Sabbath. It's a category. Can't use the word work. Can't really use the word labor. There's 39 primary categories, each of them having many, many subdivisions. All of those activities are forbidden for the Jew to do on Shabbos. So that all the forbidden things on Shabbos biblically are called milacha. So from now on, you need to remember, when I use the word milacha, that's what we're referring to. So the Jew is obligated to withhold his slave, his Eved, from doing Malach on Shabbos. Shene'emar, for the verse states, and then the Rambam quotes the verse that we just saw, L'man yanuach sharcha v'chamorcha, so that your ox and your donkey shall rest, v'inofesh ben amascha v'hager, and the son of your maidservant shall rest, and the ger. And the Rambam goes on to explain now. Eved ve'ama, the slave and the maidservant, she'anu mitzuvin al shvisas, and that we the Jews are commanded to make sure that they rest and they don't desecrate the Shabbos. Heim, they are avadim, slaves, shemalu, that were circumcised, vitavlu, and immersed in a mikvah, in a proper ritualarium, which is one of those are two things that a non-Jew needs to do in order to become Jewish, is circumcision and mikvah. L'shem avdus, but these people did these two things for the sake of becoming an Eved. They were circumcised and they were immersed in a mikvah, not to become Jewish, not to convert to Judaism, but to become avadim. V'kiblu mitzvahs sh'avodim chayovin bahem. And they accepted upon themselves those commandments that avodim are required to keep, which would be many of the commandments, much more than the 7 Noachide commandments, but not all 613. As I mentioned, they are basically the same commandments that a Jewish woman has to keep. Aval, however, avodim shelo yimolu, slaves owned by a Jew that were not circumcised, v'lo tovlu, and did not immerse in a mikvah, ella rather, kiblu alein sheva mitzvos shenitztavu b'nei noyach bilvad. They merely accepted upon themselves to keep the 7 commandments that the sons of Noach have to keep, that all of mankind have to keep. So they formally accepted upon themselves, this Eved, to keep the 7 mitzvahs, without circumcision, without immersing in the mikvah. Harei hein, then, behold, these types of avodim, ki ger toishav, they are like a ger toishav. Umutarin lases melacha b'Shabbos la'atzmon b'farhesia, and they are permitted to do melacha on Shabbos for themselves, not saying for the master, for themselves, publicly. Ki Yisrael b'choil, like a regular Jew on a weekday, on a Wednesday morning. So just as a Jew is allowed to do malacha when it's not Shabbos, so too, this type of an Eved, who was not circumcised and did not immerse in the mikveh, but accepted to keep the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, such an Eved is permitted to do melacha on Shabbos for himself in public, like a Yisrael b'choil. And then immediately the Rambam tells us, this is one of the times that he says it, being that he just said that these people are like a ger toishav, so the Rambam immediately says, and we do not accept a ger toishav any time other than when we have the Yovel, the Jubilee year, in effect. So when he's saying they're like a ger toishav, he right away clarifies, but there is no real ger toishav, no acceptance of a ger toishav nowadays. Hoyil, since the ger toishav oisem melacha latzmai b'Shabbos, since a ger toishav is permitted to do melacha for himself on Shabbos, even publicly, as long as not doing it for a Jew, like we just said, that this Eved, who's ki ger toishav, like a ger toishav, can do melacha. All right, so the ger toishav is permitted to do melacha, and then the ger tzedek. Now, a ger tzedek, the convert who became a full-fledged Jew and accepted everything, and he was circumcised and went to mikveh not to become an Eved, but to become a Jew, and in front of the Jewish court, the Beis Din, he accepted upon himself to keep all of the mitzvahs the Jews have to keep. Well, then he's a regular Jew. So then, b'mi nemar, so with regards to whom is it stated in the verse, v'nafesh ben amascha ve'ager, that the son of your maidservant and the ger shall rest. Which ger? Ger toishav, he doesn't have to rest on Shabbos. Ger tzedek, he's not called a ger in the verse, he's a Jew, like any other mitzvah. So who is this individual that the verse by Shabbos is adding and telling you that the ger also has to rest? Says the Rambam, the ger toishav, this is a certain type of a ger toishav, not the regular ger toishav. The regular ger toishav, we said, he could do malacha. It's a ger toishav, shehu lekitoi uschiroi shel Yisrael k'moi ben amosoi. He is a hired worker for the Jew, just like the son of the maidservant. That's why the verse puts that together. And it says that the son of your amma, of your maidservant, and the ger shall rest. So this is talking about a ger toishav, that is the hired worker of a Jew. So So here we're saying that this person cannot do melacha for the Jew that's his master on Shabbos. But for himself he is permitted to do. And even if this ger is an eved of the Jew, he is still permitted to do melacha for himself, just not for the Jew. So, we find here the concept of a non-Jew who cannot do melacha for the Jew, but could do melacha for himself. And then you have the whole discussion, which is very relevant and very practical today, known in the Talmud and in the halachic literature as the topic of amira lenachri, or amira legoy, to tell the non-Jew, for the Jew to tell the non-Jew on Shabbos to do something that the Jew can't do. And that itself is not as simple as people think it is. And many instances it is not permitted, and in certain cases it is. So here we find already such a concept of an individual who the Torah is referring to by saying v'ger. So the Rambam says it's a very narrow type of an individual. It's not a broad ger tzedek, ger toishav. No, it's a very specific one. Before we go any further, I just want to make mention, we won't get to it today, but in Likutei Sichos, volume 31, Chelik Lamed Aleph, a sicha on the portion of Mishpatim, page 119 and on, there is a sicha, an essay, a talk, where the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach directly discusses in detail this Rambam that we just read. But before we would get to that, let's now see one of the main commentaries on the Rambam, the Maggid Mishneh. Maggid Mishneh lived some 700 years ago, which means that he came a couple hundred years after the Rambam. And he wrote a commentary on the Rambam, and he's one of the primary commentaries on the Rambam. Oftentimes, he tries to defend the Rambam from the critics that are coming out and disagreeing with the Rambam. So, we're now going to see the Maggid Mishneh on this halacha that we just learned in the Rambam. And in the regular standard Rambams, it's printed right there on the sides of the page. Maggid Mishneh, beginning over here, and continuing on the left-hand column. Starting on the inside, and continuing on the outer column. The Rambam said, just as the person is obligated to make sure that his animal doesn't do work on Shabbos, so too he's obligated to see to it that his Eved and Amma also don't. Shene'emar, as the verse says, L'man yanuach sharcha v'chamercha, so that your ox and your donkey shall rest, v'nafish ben amascha v'hager, and the son of your maidservant and the ger shall also rest. Ha'eved v'amma v'chulu, ha'il v'ger toisha v'chulu. All right, so the Rambam said, who are we talking about over here? Since a ger toishav is allowed to do melacha, and a ger tzedek is a regular Jew, so who is it talking about? And then the Rambam went on to explain. Says the Maggid Mishneh, Da, you should know, sheyesh shloisha minei avodim, chutz me'eved ivri, shuki Yisrael, acher, l'chol dvarav. There are 3 types of avodim, besides the Eved Ivri, who is an absolute Jew. Eved Ivri is someone who, he's Jewish, and he is temporarily owned by another Jew for whatever reason. That's not what we're talking about. That's a separate category. He is Jewish. Aside for that, there are 3 categories of Eved. Normally, we would think there's 2 types of Eved. Eved Ivri, who is a Jew, and Eved Kanani. Says the Maggid Mishneh, 3 types of an Eved besides the Eved Ivri. Because the Eved Ivri is totally Jewish, levad with one exception. Sheyesh tzad shemuter b'shivcha knanis. That the Eved Ivri, even though he's Jewish, but as long as he's an Eved Ivri, he is permitted to cohabit with the Shivcha Knanis, with the non-Jewish maidservant that's owned by the same master. That's the only thing. Other than that, other than those relations that he can have with this non-Jewish woman, who is also not a regular non-Jewish woman, she's a Shivcha Knanis. But besides for that, he is 100% obligated in all the mitzvahs, not like a woman, but like a regular Jewish man. So what are the three, other than the Eved Ivri? Ho'echad, one, who Eved shemol v'toval l'shem avdus. It is the Eved, the slave, who was circumcised and immersed in the mikveh for the sake of being an Eved. V'hu chayiv b'chol mitzvahs lo yisaseh kedin Yisrael gamur. And he is obligated to keep all of the negative commandments, all the biblical prohibitions, just like an absolute Jew, like a regular Yisrael. He has to keep all 365 negative commandments. And he has to keep all the positive commandments that the Jewish women have to keep, which basically means all the positive commandments that are not time-bound, that are not limited by a particular time, that they have a beginning and an end of the time. But otherwise, all positive commandments that are not time-bound, he has to keep. Because his halachic status as far as requirement of keeping laws is like a Jewish woman. That's one type of an Eved. Hasheni, the second. Eved Areil, a slave, non-Jew, who is uncircumcised, shehisna, who made a condition, shelo yitboil v'lo yomul. He's becoming an Eved, he has a Jewish owner, he's a slave, he will not immerse in the mikveh, he will not be circumcised. Ella, rather, what did he say that he will do? Yishmar sheva mitzvahs shinstavu b'nei noyach. He will observe, he will keep the 7 commandments that the Bnei Noach were commanded to keep. V'zen nikra, and this type of an Eved is called Eved Toishav. For many people, that might be a new term. I mean, for many learned people as well. We know there's Eved Ivri, there's Eved Kenani, there's Ger Toishav, there's Ger Tzedek. And now the Maggid Mishneh is introducing us to a new term. And that is Eved Teishav, the resident Eved. V'nikra b'k'tzas mekoymes Eved Areil. And in some places, in a few places, he's called Eved Areil, the uncircumcised Eved. V'dinoi kiger Toishav. And his halachic status, his law, is like a Ger Toishav. Remember, the Ger Toishav is the non-Jew who accepted upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs. Well, this is a non-Jew. The only difference is he happens to be owned by a Jew. He's becoming an Eved of a Jew. Vashlishi. And the third and final type of an Eved. Who Eved Areil. This is again, same thing so far as the previous one. He's an Eved who's uncircumcised. She'oived avodas kechavim umazolis shaloi. He worships his idolatry. He didn't take upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs b'nei noyach. He's still an idolater. So he's an Eved. He will not be circumcised. He will not immerse in the mikveh. And he won't even accept upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs. He's still worshipping whatever nonsense, whatever forbidden idol worship he's worshipping, whatever foreign gods. That's the third type. So again, very briefly, 3 types of non-Jewish avodim. The classical Eved Knani, circumcised, went to mikveh in order to become an Eved Knani. He's obligated to keep all the mitzvahs that a Jewish woman is. Number 2, the Eved Toishav, who did not circumcise, did not go to mikveh, but he took upon himself formally to keep the Sheva mitzvahs. And finally, the Eved, Ovid Avodah Zarah. The Eved that didn't take upon himself anything, surely no mikveh, no circumcision, and he doesn't keep the 7, but he's an Eved owned by a Jew. V'nireh midivrei Rabbeinu, and it appears to me from the words of the Rambam, Shekosav, who wrote, Perek Yudalad Milchus Isurei Bia, Uferek Yud Milchus Avodah Zarah. He quotes 2 places in the Rambam, chapter 14 of Isurei Bia, and chapter 10 of Avodah Zarah. What does it seem that the Rambam says there in those 2 places? Shezeh, that this 3rd category, the Eved that did not even accept the Sheva mitzvahs, Asur l'kaim l'klal be'eretz Yisrael, it is forbidden to allow him to exist at all in the land of Israel. The Jew can't keep him in Eretz Yisrael, can't have that Eved. V'chein hu emes, and that is in fact the truth. Mishneh says the Rambam is absolutely right. That is true. As the Rambam says, that this 3rd category is not allowed in Eretz Yisrael. V'akavana l'Rabbeinu b'chan. So getting back to our halacha here in Shabbos, the one we just learned, the Rambam here is referring hu b'shnei chalakim harishonim, to the first 2 types of avodim. The whole discussion here about the Eved, where the Rambam says he's like a ger toishav, and then this one is his own person, and this one is owned by a Jew, he's talking about these 2 types of Eved, the first 2 types. The 3rd type is out. Forget him. Ho'echad, one of them, the first one, V'ushemal, he's the one who was circumcised for the sake of becoming an Eved. Asur b'chol melacha, that's the Eved that is forbidden to do any melacha. And when the Torah says, make sure that the ger does not desecrate Shabbos, that's this guy. Umuzar aleha, and he is commanded, he's warned not to do any melacha on Shabbos. V'ne'enash, and he gets punished. Just as the Torah states clearly, don't do any melacha, you, your son, your daughter, your Eved, and your maidservant. Umilvad zeh, and aside for the fact that he is commanded not to do melacha, b'yoyse b'reshus adoinov, while he is under the ownership and the jurisdiction and the control of his master, the Jew, das Rabbeinu, the opinion of the Rambam, shehadon muzar olav, that it's actually a commandment on the Jew, his owner, to see to it that he doesn't do malacha. It's not just, well, that's his business, and if he desecrates the Shabbos, he's got a big problem. No, in addition to that, his owner is obligated to see to it that he doesn't. Just as he is obligated to see to it that the animal does not desecrate the Shabbos. Now, the animal has no commandments of its own. And if the animal does malacha, the animal does not get punished for that. The master, the owner of the animal, is obligated to see to it not to let the animal do malacha. Now, even though, as the Rambam states right at the beginning, there is a very fundamental difference between one's animal and his Eved, that the Eved is a ben das, an intelligent human, doesn't matter. He's obligated to see to it to hold back the Eved from doing melacha. So it's an obligation on the Jew, besides the personal obligation on the Eved. Vasheni. And the second category that the Rambam is talking about is our second Eved that we just introduced. Rabbi, his master, the Jew, Muzhar Olav, Bimleches Rabbi, is commanded not to allow him to do melacha for the Jew, for himself, the owner. But he, the Eved, is permitted to do melacha for himself. It's just that he can't do any melacha for his master. And his master, the Jew, must make sure that he doesn't. But for himself, no problem. He's allowed to do malacha. V'cheinu din ger toishav. And that's why the second type of an eved, says the Rambam, is like a ger toishav, because that is actually the Jewish law, the type of Shabbos relationship that the ger toishav has. Shu schirei shel Yisrael, if the ger toishav is a hired worker of the Jew. Not a regular ger toishav, but as the Rambam said, it's a ger toishav that was hired by the Jew. So he's not an eved, he's just a ger toishav who's hired by the Jew. That and the eved, second type of an eved, who didn't go to mikveh, who didn't get circumcised to be an eved, but did accept upon himself to keep the 7, and he's an eved owned by the Jew, he and the ger toishav, that is a hired worker for the Jew, have the same status. Namely, for themselves they could do malacha, for their owner or employer, or however you want to call him, they can't. V'achelek hashlishi, and the third type of an eved, the one that's an idolater, lo yizkiri Rabbeinu klal. The Rambam didn't mention him at all. He's out of the picture because you're not allowed to keep him in Eretz Yisrael anyway. So he doesn't appear in this halacha that we just learned. He's not there. There's 3 types of avadim, and the Rambam addresses eved 1 and 2. Ulemata avar dinoi. And further on, when we get to the end of this discussion, says the Maggid Mishneh, I'll explain his halachic status of that third one that the Rambam kept out. All right, so that is the Maggid's Mishneh, his explanation in the Rambam. And he continues and he says, V'chol zeh, and all of this, what we just explained, Yatzel Rabbeinu, the Rambam derived all of this. What's his source? Where did he get this halacha of Eved 1 and Eved 2 with regards to Shabbos like that? And that Eved 2 is like a ger toishav who is a hired worker. He derived this from a piece of Gemara, of Talmud, in tractate of Yevamos. The Chulei Alma Mihas V'nofesh ben Amascha be'eved Arei lakosuf medaber. The Gemara says that everybody, all opinions, have to agree that when the verse states, and the son of your maidservant shall rest on Shabbos, we're talking about an Eved Arel, an uncircumcised Eved. My mashma, what's the implication that we're talking about an uncircumcised Eved? Tanya, for we learned in a Braisa, V'nafesh ben Amascha, quoting the verse, that the son of your maidservant shall rest on Shabbos, Be'eved Arel Hakosov Medaber. That we're talking over here, this is a Braisa, which is a Tanoic statement, which is basically like Mishnah. And it states over there that the interpretation of this verse, where it says the son of your maidservant, is this Eved Ariel that we're talking about, meaning the second type of an Eved, who took upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs, but he's uncircumcised. So then the Gemara challenges this explanation and says, do you really mean to say that we're talking about an Eved who's uncircumcised? Perhaps it's talking about the Eved who is circumcised, a regular Eved Knani that was circumcised for the sake of becoming an Eved. So the Gemara answers that can't be, because when the verse states that in order for your Eved and your Amma, your slave and your maidservant, that they should rest like you, Hare Eved Ma'ol Amur. So then you explicitly mentioned that Eved that is circumcised. That's referring to the Eved that is circumcised. So then what do I have with this part of the verse where it says, and the son of your Amma should rest? So what's left? So the Gemara deduces that must be talking about an Eved who's uncircumcised, because we have the other words that tell us about the circumcised Eved. Vager, and then what about that last word that says and the ger? Ze ger toishav. That's talking about a ger toishav. And the Gemara challenges right away. Atoimer ze ger toishav? You really mean to say that when the Torah says ger, it's referring to the ger toishav? Oyeinei ger tzedek. Perhaps it's a regular, full-fledged Jew who's a righteous convert, a ger tzedek. Says no, because when the verse states, and your ger that's in your gates, that's the ger tzedek. So what do I do with the word v'hager besides gercha asher bisharecha? What do I do with the word v'hager? It's a ger toishav. This must mean the ger toishav. Who else can we call the ger? If it can't be the ger tzedek, then what's the Torah mean when it says ger? That's the Gemara in Yevamos. So the Gemara clearly is making over here this distinction and breaking it down to tell us that the Torah says that the ger toishav has to keep Shabbos, the ger tzedek, of course, and two types of Eved, meaning the Eved who is circumcised and the uncircumcised Eved. Uvekrisis perek dalet mechusrei kapara. And in Tractate Krisus, the Gemara says as follows. Shaninu bivraisa. The Maggid Mishneh says we learned in a brisa there in Tractate of Krisus. Rabbi Shimon Omer, the Tana, Rabbi Shimon says, Echad ger toishav, Echad eved v'ama ha-toishavim. Whether it's a ger toishav, regular ger toishav, or whether it is an eved and an amma that are toishavim, as the Maggid Mishneh said before, you have an eved toishav. So this is the source for that, this brisa. So if you have an eved, a male slave, or an amma, a maidservant, that are toishavim. Oisim melacha b'Shabbos la'atzmam k'Yisrael b'choil. They are permitted, according to Reb Shimon, opinion number 1, to do melacha on Shabbos like a regular Jew on a weekday. Amar of Ado bar Ahava, then the Amoira in the Talmud, the later generation, he states, halacha ki Rabbi Shimon, that in fact, the final ruling is like this Reb Shimon, that a ger toishav and an eved toishav can do melacha on Shabbos just like a Jew can do on a regular weekday, Sunday through Friday. V'das Rabbeinu, and says the Maggid Mishneh, the opinion of the Rambam, she'eved oived kechav u'mazalois ha'omer b'yevamos hu eved v'ama toishavim and iskar b'krisus k'div Reb Shimon. That the Rambam holds that when the Talmud in Yevamos, the first Gemara that we brought down, when that speaks of the Eved that's an idolater, that is synonymous with this Reb Shimon's opinion in the Gemara in Krisus, that's an Eved Toishav. V'oisam heim shenechleku Rabbi Shmuel v'Rabbi Akiva sham ba'choyletz imutu l'kaimon. And with regards to those types of people, it's actually a Tanoic dispute between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, whether we, the Jews, are allowed to keep them. Can we allow them to remain in that status in Eretz Yisrael? Ve'elu, and the Gemara concludes, Shafilu Rabbi Akiva moide, that even Rabbi Akiva admits, Shim hisnoim rabbi, that if this Eved made a condition with his Jewish master when he acquired him, Shelo Yomul, that he is not going to have a circumcision. So there was no misunderstanding. Right at the beginning, as soon as he was bought as an Eved, this Eved tells his Jewish owner, I will not ever circumcise. Shemutu l'kaimoi. Then even Rabbi Akiva says you're allowed to keep him, because he stipulated that from the beginning. This is not a regular Eved who's refusing to do what he's supposed to do. From the very onset, he already said that he's not going to do it. And even if he didn't explicitly make this condition that he will not be circumcised, even then, we try to convince him for 12 months from the day that he was bought, as the Rambam explains over there in chapter 14 of the Isurei Biyah. But an idolatrous Eved, Ein Safek, there's no doubt. We do not discuss and play around or anything with him, not even for one day. The Eved that refuses to be circumcised, and he didn't stipulate that from the very beginning. So then we give him 12 months that we try to get to convince him, and those 12 months he's allowed to remain in that status. And then afterwards, he's got a choice. But an Eved who is not even accepting the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noyach, forget about not being circumcised and going to mikveh. He is not accepting the Sheva Mitzvahs. He's still an idolater. We do not give him even one day. We don't let him stay. Out. Or kill him. He's an idolater. At best, let him pack up and leave the land of Israel. Rabbi Shmuel, who disagrees with Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shmuel holds that you are allowed to keep him. He doesn't hold, when he says you're allowed to keep this idolater in your home, because you're not allowed to give an idolater even a plot or any type of residence in Eretz Yisrael. If he's an idolater, you're not allowed to allow him to live there. It's only the Ger Toishav who's allowed to live in parts of Eretz Yisrael. So Rabbi Shmuel agrees with that. B'chol ze pashut, and all of this is simple. Ella, vadai eved arel zeh. So therefore, this eved that is not circumcised that we're talking about, hu toishav hanizkar bekrisus. This is the toishav that's mentioned in the Talmud in Tractate of Krisus. V'nikra eved arel, and he's called an uncircumcised slave, because he's not circumcised. V'oisei shemol v'toval, and the one who was circumcised and did go to mikvah, hu shenemar olav, he's the one that the verse says, Laman yanuach avdecha v'amoscha kamoicha, so that your Eved, your slave, and your maidservant shall rest on Shabbos like you. That's the Eved that did go to mikveh and was circumcised. For Rabbi Muzar olav, and his Jewish master is commanded and obligated to see to it that he does not do any work. Even if this Eved wants to do something for himself in the privacy of his own room. He has his own room, and he's turning on and off the light in his room. His Jewish master is obligated to stop him and tell him, you can't do that, it's Shabbos. This is what the Gemara means, that, behold, a circumcised Eved is mentioned in the verse. When we're going back and forth and we're saying, maybe the word ger means this. So we say, no, we already have the verse that tells us that a circumcised Eved, and that's this verse of Avdecha v'amoscha kamoicha. U'la'azoras Rabbi Yomru, she'im la'azoras Eved atzmei kvar niskar b'lo yisaseh kol melacha ato v'inchovitecha avdecha v'masecha. So obviously it's talking about the Jewish owner is obligated to hold back his Eved from doing work. Because as far as the Eved himself, there's already the initial verse that says, you cannot do melacha, not you, nor your son, your daughter, and your Eved and your Amma. So this additional pasuk of Laman Yanuach, that's talking to the Jewish master. V'im la'anshoy be'asa, and if you want to tell me that the verse is coming to say to punish him if he did do it, avoloy lahazhir rabbi olav, but not that it's telling the master that he's obligated. In other words, you want to tell me these two verses are both talking to the Eved. One is saying he can't do malacha, and the other one is saying that if he does, he'll be punished. But neither of them are telling the Jewish owner of the Eved that he has to hold back the Eved, if that's what you want to argue. So the legal status of the slave that was circumcised and did go to mikveh is explained already. That in all Torah laws is just like a Jewish woman. So obviously that can't be the meaning of these two verses because that's already an established fact. So what do we do with this extra verse? Obviously, as we said, it's to tell us that the Jewish master, his Jewish owner, is obligated to see to it that his Eved does not do work on Shabbos. Shaloi kedivrei harav Avram Zal. And this is not like the words, like the opinion of what we call the Ravid. The Ravid is the main critic of the Rambam. And Shekosav Basagois, the Ravid writes in his critique on the Rambam, Shekivan shu bar oinshin ein rabbi muzhar olav. Ravid says that the logic is that since an Eved is one who can be punished, he is a human being who has intelligence and freedom of choice. And therefore, if he breaks any Jewish law that he's not allowed to break, meaning he doesn't keep a mitzvah that a Jewish woman has to keep, so that would apply to him as well, so he gets punished. So therefore, says the Ravid, it can't be that his Jewish owner is obligated and that he has a commandment and that he would get punished. It's not like an animal. When you're talking about the animal is not a bar das, doesn't have any intelligence in that regard. So the owner has to make sure that my animal doesn't work on Shabbos. But a human being, says the Ravid, no. It's his business. So says the Maggid Mishneh that this is obviously not like the Ravid. And I've already proven the validity and of the opinion of the Rambam. But what is difficult to me, says the Maggid Mishneh, I agree with the Rambam, but I have a little bit of a difficulty here, and that is, what is found in the Rambam's books, Shumevi Levid Mohol Mikra Shel V'Nofesh Ben Amascha. The Rambam is bringing a different verse to prove to us that a circumcised Eved, a real proper Eved Knani, meaning the first category of the three, the verse that teaches us that he cannot do any melacha, the Rambam quotes the verse, V'Nofesh Ben Amascha, that the son of your maidservant shall rest. But the Gemara uses that verse for the second category. That verse is the Eved that is uncircumcised. And the Gemara uses the other verse of Leman Yanuach, that Avducha v'Amascha should rest kamoicha like you. That's the verse that teaches me about the Eved Arel, about the Eved Mohol, about the circumcised Eved. And I need to look into this deeply. He's asking on the Rambam why in all of the versions of this Rambam that he's seen, they all have the Rambam quoting the verse, but seemingly it should be the other verse. Parenthetically, what we can answer on that particular question of the Maggid Mishneh is we find there are many rules in the study of Rambam, how to understand him and how to understand when he brings a verse as a proof text. The Rambam in a number of places quotes a verse that is not the one that the Gemara quotes for a certain point, like in this case. And the explanation is basically the Rambam, as he states very clearly, so to say, his mission statement in his introduction to the entire Maggid opus of the Mishneh Torah of the Rambam. His 14 books of the Rambam is halachos. It's Jewish law. It's not commentary on Chumash, on verses. It's not commentary on Mishnah. It's not commentary on Gemara. It's not Midrash, allegoric. It's not history. And therefore, anytime you see in the Rambam something that seems to be like any of those above mentioned, it isn't. And therefore, at times the Rambam will quote a verse that sounds stronger to prove his point, or sounds closer to the point he wants to prove, although that's not exactly the technical verse that the Gemara learns out from. That's okay. The Rambam is not teaching us Gemara. The Rambam has skipped all of that. As he writes in introduction, one need only learn the Torah, the written law, and then learn his writing, and you'll know all of the commandments and how to fulfill them. So therefore, the Maggid Mishneh's question can be answered that he's bringing the easier verse that seemingly teaches us the Eved that's circumcised, even though when you study the Gemara, that's actually not the verse that's used. Anyhow, the Kosav Rabbeinu, and the Rambam writes, Ger Taishav Shulakito Yuschiroi, right? Then we had over here towards the end of Halacha 14, the Rambam said, what about a Ger Taishav, not an Eved, but he's a hired worker of the Jew. The Chimdumeli, and it appears to me, says the Maggid Mishneh, the Lav Davka, it's not necessarily exactly limited to what the Rambam is saying over here. Even if this Ger Taishav is not a hired worker for the Jew. It's still forbidden biblically for a Jew to tell the Ger Taishav, not his Ger Taishav, who works for him as a hired worker, but to tell the Ger Taishav to do melacha for the Jew. See, as mentioned earlier, the whole concept of Amira telling, instructing a non-Jew to do something, so much of that is forbidden as a decree from the rabbis. Here, the Maggid Mishneh is suggesting that as an extension to what the Rambam is saying, it's forbidden for a Jew biblically to tell a Ger Taishav to do milacha for a Jew. Sheharei, for behold, kol she'oisa oisa malacha b'shvil Yisrael hareu kischira b'oisei davar. Because whenever a non-Jew does a malacha for the Jew, it is legally as if he's his hired worker for that particular job. Now, that doesn't seem to be what the Rambam is saying. The Maggid Mishneh seems to take it further. That's why he says lav davka. It's not precisely like that. The Rambam says a ger taishav, that is the hired worker of the Jew. The Jew can't tell him to do something for him. Says the Maggid Mishneh, the regular ger taishav is a ger taishav though. So if the Jew, any Jew, tells him to do something for himself, for the Jew, that means in that particular job, I hired you to do it. Whether I pay you or I don't pay you, that doesn't matter. You're employed by me to do this. So there's the Jew, and right now he would like to eat an apple. And the apple is hanging on the tree. The Ger Toshav doesn't have to be his sharecropper who normally harvests his trees. He's his next door neighbor. And he says, Mr. Ger Toshav, would you be so kind and please pick that apple for me to eat now? Says the Maggid Mishneh, that is absolutely forbidden. Why? Because you asked him to do that for you, so that means he is now your hired worker. That may be the only job he ever does for you, and that apple is the only... What's the difference? According to the Maggid Mishneh, that job that he is doing for you, he is like your hired worker. And we don't find that it would be permissible for a Ger Toshav to do Malach on Shabbos unless he's doing it for himself. That's fine. He's not the Eved who the Jew has to withhold his Eved from doing Malacha. Fine. He's an Eved, he's a Ger Toshav, and he can do Malacha for himself. That's the only heter. So a guy, not just a regular guy, but he's a Ger Toshav for himself, that's fine. The Maggid Mishneh says, I'm not arguing on the Rambam. I don't mean to extend the Rambam to somewhere where he didn't say and he didn't mean. You read the Rambam that we just read, and it says, a Ger Toshav that is his hired worker. It says the Rambam is speaking, as the Torah often does, in the common case. There are many things where the Torah says something, and it clearly does not mean limited to that case, but it gives you the classic example. So the Ger Toshav, that's a hired worker, that's the one that the Jew can't tell him to do something. But it doesn't literally mean only a hired worker. It means you can't have him do something for you. And likewise, another Rishon, another of the early codifiers, the Rashba, also writes the same thing in his sefer, in his book. And actually, the Rashba disagrees with the simple reading in the Rambam. So if the Rambam simply means what he says, and he really means a Ger Toshav that is your hired worker, but not like the Maggid Mishneh wants to read into the Rambam, well then the Rashba disagrees with the Rambam and says like the Maggid Mishneh is saying. Because the Rashba holds that the Rambam means exactly what he said. The Maggid Mishneh says, I disagree with the Rashba's reading of the Rambam. In other words, the Maggid Mishneh agrees with the Rashba's bottom line halacha. The Rashba says the Rambam didn't mean what he said. The Rambam means what he says, and therefore I disagree with him. The Maggid Mishneh says, I have the same view you do, but I don't agree that the Rambam meant what he said. He means what you say, what you don't want to read into his words, meaning Ger Toshav, that's not even a hired worker. The Rambam meant that too. And the Rashba says that the Rambam didn't mean that. He wrote clearly that if he's a hired worker of the Jew. And even though his arguments are not, they don't force, they're not absolute, but indeed it is the truth. So the bottom line is, Maggid Mishneh says, the truth is that any Ger Toshav cannot do Milacha for the Jew on Shabbos. Next, now the Maggid Mishneh is going to address the next piece in the Rambam. Umasha Kosav Rabbeinu, and that which the Rambam wrote, Ve'ein mekablim Ger Toshav, that we do not accept the Ger Toshav. So he said, unless we have the Yovel, the Jubilee year. Right after the Rambam speaks about Ger Toshav, then he said, when he said that this Eved is like a Ger Toshav, and then he says, and a Ger Toshav who is a hired worker of the Jew, and then the Rambam said, but we don't have a Ger Toshav. Mivur Barucha bePerik Yud Beis Milchas Isurei Bia. So this is explained at length by the Rambam in chapter 12 of Isurei Bia. Notice here the Rambam is just throwing it in as a one-liner. But the Maggid Mishneh is telling us where does he really explain it is in the laws of Isurei Biyah. Well, lefi ma she'amarnu, Eved Toishav, Veger Toishav, Einam Oisin Melacha, Dvar Torah, Bishvil Shum Yisrael, Bein Rabbi, Bein Sheinei Rabbi. So according to what we said, the Maggid Mishneh is now summing up, that an Eved Toishav, remember, that was category number 2 of Eved, the Eved Toishav, the one that is not circumcised, but he accepts upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs. And for that matter, the Ger Toishav, those two biblically are forbidden to do any malacha for any Jew, whether it's his master. He's an Eved Toishav, so he's got a Jewish master. So he can't do malacha for his master nor for anyone else. And then the Ger Toishav, who has no master, he can't do malacha for any Jew either. But they are permitted to do melacha for themselves, like the Rambam said, like a Yisrael, like a regular Jew, on a weekday. Whatever a Jew can do on a weekday, which is all the melachas, so too they can do for themselves. And what about category number 1 of the Eved? The one who was circumcised and did immerse in the mikveh for the sake of becoming an Eved, Knani. Hu muzar shalorasis shum melacha. He is commanded not to do any melacha. Period. Not even for himself. And according to the Rambam, even his master is obligated to make sure that he doesn't do melacha. Unlike the Ravid, who says you can't command his master when it comes to, you can only tell the master, don't let him do melacha for you. But what he does in his own privacy, he's an adult who has free choice. You're his master, you own him, fine. But according to the Rambam, no. The Torah obligates the master to withhold him from doing melacha. Period. Now, Maggid Mishneh promised us that he's going to get to the 3rd category, the one that the Rambam doesn't even deal with, the one that we're not allowed to even allow him to exist, and that is the Eved that continues to be an idolater. Says the Maggid Mishneh. Now I'm going to explain the 3rd one. Kigoyin, for example, Hashfachois hanochriyois vayishmeeliois hoimdes beveis Yisrael begayuson bilti kabbalas mitzvahs klal. It sounds like it's nowadays even. And he says the non-Jewish maids or maidservant, the Ishmaelios, the Islamic women, which are in the Jewish home as non-Jews without accepting any mitzvahs at all. She's the Shabbos guy. She's it's a derogatory statement, but it's not always meant in a derogatory way. In the slang, I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but in the Yiddish, the European Jewish culture, and therefore in the literature and the lexicon, she's referred to as the shikze. The shikze, meaning the non-Jewish maid. So this non-Jewish maid, she works for the Jew. She might even have room and board and live in the Jew. Just like the olden days, Eved and Shivcha, or Amma. She is like a maidservant. So what about her? She never accepted any mitzvahs. And for all we know, she still practices her religion, whatever it is. The Kosav Ramban Zal, the Sefer Teras Adam, and the Ramban Nachmanides, he writes in his book, Zeloshoinoi, and we quote, Ani oimer, I say, says the Ramban, Eved Arel Oived Kechav Mazalis Shaloi Einoi Ger Toishav. The uncircumcised Eved who worships idolatry is not a Ger Toishav. Ve'einoi Bichal Isur Loi, and he's not included in the prohibition. Lo Yizkira Torah El Toishavim. When the Torah speaks about Shabbos and the Ger, it's only speaking about the Ger Toishav. And this guy is by no means a Ger Toishav. Sharei Kibul Aleim Sheva Mitzvahs. For the Ger Toishav or the Evet Toishav, they accepted upon themselves the 7 mitzvahs. And the Torah warns us and forbids them to do any work on Shabbos for the Jew. But these people, the Eved that's uncircumcised and he's an idolater, they're not included at all. Torah doesn't address them. Comes to Shabbos, there's no prohibition for them. Atkan. Up here is the quote of the Ramban. And so it seems from the Rambam also clearly. So the Maggid Mishneh says that what the Ramban said in that one quote that we just brought down, same thing with the Rambam holds. Meaning, the Rambam doesn't even talk about that third category. That person, he would biblically be allowed to do malacha for the Jew. He's an Eved who's owned by a Jew. You're not allowed to have him in the first place. So if you do have him, there's no prohibition of the Shabbos is totally irrelevant to him. And therefore, biblically, the Jew can tell him to do malacha for the Jew because he's an idolater. However, going back to the Rashba, he wrote, Shekol Eved Arel, Hafilu Eved Kechamazolis, Bimashma, that every uncircumcised Eved, even if he's an idolater, is included. Shim loikein, because if that weren't to be the case, yoimar akasuv ger toishav she'enei konu liyisrael. So all the verse would have to say is the ger toishav can't do malacha for the Jew. The ger toishav that's not acquired by the Jew, he's not an eved, he's not property of the Jew. He's a ger toishav though. If the Torah would say he can't do malacha for the Jew, so then I would be able to deduce logically that of course the Evet Toishav can't do malacha for me because he's owned by me. A Ger Toishav is simply a non-Jew who took upon himself to keep the 7. And he can't do malacha for the Jew. Well then certainly the Evet Toishav can't do malacha for the Jew. Vani Oimer, and the Maggid Mishneh says, so in order to get around this Rashba, because I disagree with the Rashba. So says the Rashba, because the Rashba is the one who holds that even an Eved that's an idolater is also not allowed. So says the Maggid Mishneh, no. I agree with the Ramban and with the Rambam. The Rashba has a point. Says, no, he doesn't. Why not? Ein mazhirin midin kal v'chomer. You cannot deduce a Torah prohibition from logic. You're telling me that if it were to be true, all the Torah had to say was the lesser of the two, the Ger Toishav, and I would know certainly the Evet Toishav. If the Torah doesn't say it explicitly, you cannot deduce such a thing. That's a rule that we have. Void she'ein kal v'chomer. And furthermore, it's not a kal v'chomer. That logic does not work. Why? Because I would say, because the reason why the Ger Toishav can't do anything for you, and I would say, but your own Evet could, I would mistakenly say, is because the Torah is being cautious and caring with Jewish finances. I would say, no, look, the Evet that you own, you paid for. You paid hard cash for this guy. You paid a lot of money. Why should he spend 25 hours a week, an entire day off? He's your Eved. Of course he should work. Send him to your field. He's not your behema. He's not your animal that can't work for you. He's not your son. He's not your daughter. He's an Eved that you paid and he's not Jewish. So I would say, the Ger Toishav, who's your neighbor, no, he can't do anything for you because he's a Ger Toishav. But the Evet Toishav, I have logic to explain why he should work. Because the Torah doesn't want you to have a financial loss. Therefore, the Torah had to specifically forbid him as well. So therefore the Torah does say ger toishav can't, as well as evet toishav can't. But who could? According to the Maggid Mishneh and the Ramban, and the way the Maggid Mishneh explains the Rambam, everybody but the Ramban, and that is that the Eved, which is an idolater, that third category, he could do malacha, even for a Jew. And the only one who disagrees with that is the Rashba. Oid Kosav, furthermore, the Rashba writes, Hayalem loymar b'choletz. So in the Gemara in Yevamos, they should have said be'eved toishav hakasav medaber v'lei be'eved arel. So they should have said that it's talking about an eved toishav, which is that second category, who wasn't circumcised, but he accepts Shev mitzvahs. Why did they say eved arel? And I already pushed away this complaint, this claim. That relative to a circumcised Eved, the Eved Toishav is called Arel, is called uncircumcised. When it comes to the third category, the Eved, he's not just not circumcised, he is an idolater. No one argues there. No one says you're allowed to keep him. The only argument between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva is the second category. The Eved that refuses to be circumcised, and he accepts upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So the question is, can we keep him or not? But the third category, not even a discussion. Everybody agrees you can't keep the one who is still worshipping Avodah Zarah. And this seems to me to be clear. That it's absolutely, you have to say like the Rambam and the Ramban. Again, rejecting the Rashba. So it comes out for us from the above mentioned, L'daitam, according to the Rambam and the Ramban, which I agree with, says the Maggid Mishneh. What about the needs of a Jew who is ill, who is not in a life-threatening situation? We have 2 categories when it comes to a choyle, to a Jew who's ill on Shabbos. The severe situation is the one whose life is in danger, and then everybody and anybody does malacha, including the Jew himself, if you can get the non-Jew to do it, and it doesn't, won't endanger the Jew's life, that's something else. And then you have the choyle, the someone who's sick or in discomfort, but he's not at all in any life-threatening situation. So then you do malacha for that person through non-Jews, all right? And likewise, if a Jew passed away on the first day of Yom Tov, outside of Eretz Yisrael, we have 2 days of each Jewish holiday. So if on the first day of the holiday, the Jew died, so then he should be buried through non-Jews. Because to move the Jewish body of a deceased is forbidden. To dig a grave is forbidden. All those things which are malachas, or whatever, digging the grave is a malacha. So all those things are done through non-Jews. All right, so how does that fit into here? All of the above, those 2 examples that we just gave, would be permitted through the Eved that is in the second category, the Eved Toishav. That would be permissible. Well, das Rashba soll. One second. I'm sorry. Not the second category, the third category. So according to the Rambam and the Ramban, for someone who's ill, whose life is not in danger, which we know it can be done through a non-Jew. So these third types of avodim, they can surely do it. Well, das Rashba zal asur, and according to the Rashba, no, that too is forbidden, even though he's an idolater. And because this is something which is so common and it's very relevant all the time, therefore I elaborated to such a great deal. So it comes out that the Maggid Mishneh is speaking in practical terms for nowadays as well. So basically, like the little piece that he had over towards the end, a Jew who has hired live-in non-Jewish help, that person would be permitted to do anything that's needed for a choyle that is not in danger. For a Jewish person who's sick, whose life is not in danger, therefore the Jew can't do malacha for them because their life is not in danger. But these people could, according to the Maggid Mishneh. All right, so with that we've concluded for now the Rambam and the Maggid Mishneh inside. What we're going to have to do next time is the Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish Code of Law, and that would be in the laws, in the first part of the Shulchan Aruch known as Oira Chaim, in the laws of Shabbos, Siman Dalet Shin, which is 304, chapter 304 in the laws of Shabbos, which is where the Jewish Code of Law deals with what we just learned, and then we'll see some of the commentaries there, primarily the Magen Avram and on. So until next time, I'd like to wish everyone all the best, and please make sure to abide by and adhere to and keep the Sheva Mitzvahs and spread the word and influence the entire world ultimately to keep all Sheva Mitzvahs so we can all greet and welcome our righteous Mashiach now.